Human gets arrogant alien diplomat pregnant for revenge. She's absolutely furious. The gleaming spires of the Galactic Council headquarters rose like crystalline fingers against the artificial sky of Station Zenith. Numerous species from across the known universe mingled in its grand corridors, a living testament to what many called the greatest diplomatic achievement in history: peace among the stars. Commander Jack Reynolds had long ago stopped being impressed by any of it. 20 years in Terran diplomatic services, 15 of those as military liaison to various alien delegations, had worn the wonder thin. At 45, with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much conflict, Jack approached his duties with the weary professionalism of a man who had witnessed the gap between diplomatic pleasantries and the brutal reality of interspecies politics. Commander Reynolds, your presence is requested in Chamber 17B. Ambassador Tavin has filed another formal complaint regarding Earth's mining operations in the Proxima system. Jack suppressed a groan as his assistant's message came through his neural implant. Of course she had. Ambassador Narala Tavin had made obstructing human interests her personal crusade over the past 3 years. The Auroran diplomat was the epitome of her species' superiority complex. The Aurorans, tall, slender beings with iridescent skin that shifted color with their moods and thoughts, considered themselves the intellectual and technological elite of the Galactic Council. Their homeworld had achieved space travel centuries before humans had even harnessed electricity, a fact they never tired of mentioning. Inform the ambassador I'll be there momentarily, Jack replied, straightening his formal uniform. Every encounter with Tavin required perfect protocol. Any deviation would be exploited as evidence of human inferiority. Jack made his way through the crowded atrium, nodding briefly to representatives of allied species. The Centaurians offered their traditional greeting, their tentacles rippling in recognition. The Vordenai delegation, perpetually suspicious, merely watched with their multiple eyes as he passed. Chamber 17B was a smaller negotiation room, designed for preliminary discussions before matters were brought to the full council. When Jack entered, Ambassador Tavin was already seated, her skin shimmering a cold blue that Jack had learned indicated disdain. Commander Reynolds, she said, not bothering to rise. Her voice carried the musical intonation common to Aurorans, but held no warmth. How gracious of you to finally arrive. Jack maintained his professional facade. Ambassador Tavin, I came as soon as I was notified. I understand you have concerns about our mining operations. Narala's skin rippled briefly with flecks of orange, amusement, before settling back to blue. Concerns? Is that what you call it when your species violates Article 47 of the Proxima Territorial Agreement? She gestured to the holo display floating between them. Your mining vessels have exceeded the quota by 17% this quarter. Again, our readings show compliance within the allowed margin of error, Jack countered, taking his seat across from her. The fluctuations in the asteroid belt's mineral density require. Spare me your technical excuses, Narala interrupted, her skin darkening to indigo. The Council has accepted my petition for an immediate investigation. All human mining operations will cease pending the review. Jack stiffened. That's completely unnecessary. If there are discrepancies, we can address them without. The decision is made, Commander. Narala's lips curved into what humans would recognize as a smile, though it held nothing but contempt. Perhaps next time, your superiors will select representatives who understand basic mathematical principles. Though, given human cognitive limitations, I suppose that might be difficult. Jack maintained his composure through decades of diplomatic training, but inside, rage boiled. This wasn't just bureaucratic obstruction. This was personal. The shutdown would affect thousands of human workers and dozens of colony worlds dependent on those resources. Ambassador, may I remind you that when the Vordenai exceeded their quotas last year, you advocated for leniency and continued operations during the investigation. Narala's skin flickered momentarily. The situations are hardly comparable. They are identical, Jack pressed, except for the species involved. The ambassador rose in a fluid motion, her height allowing her to look down at Jack. I grow weary of this conversation. The investigation proceeds as ordered. Perhaps you should spend your time educating your minors rather than wasting mine. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and Commander, I've also submitted a formal review of your performance to your superiors. Your emotional approach to these negotiations suggests you may be unsuited for your position. Perhaps Earth can find a more capable representative, though that may be asking too much. When the door slid shut behind her, Jack remained seated, his hands clenched in a fist so tight his knuckles whitened. This wasn't the first time. For 3 years, Nirala Tavin had systematically undermined human interests, blocked trade agreements, nitpicked treaties, and personally humiliated Jack at every opportunity. The mining shutdown was the final straw. It would take months to resolve, during which human colonies would suffer shortages. Some might even face critical resource depletion. And a review of his performance? That could end his career. All because an arrogant Auroran had decided humans needed to be put in their place. Jack's neural implant chimed with an incoming message from Earth Command. No doubt, they were already receiving complaints about the mining suspension. His career was likely hanging by a thread. That night, in his private quarters, Jack stared out at the vast starscape beyond the station's viewport, a tumbler of Earth whiskey, a rare and expensive import, in his hand. The alcohol did little to dull his anger. 3 years of diplomatic insults, professional sabotage, and thinly veiled racism. 3 years of watching human interests suffer while Nirala Tavin ascended the ranks of the Auroran diplomatic corps, largely by positioning herself as the check against human expansionism. There has to be a way, he muttered to himself, refilling his glass. Not through official channels. Nirala had too much influence there. Her family held significant political power on Aurora Prime, and rumor had it she was being groomed for a seat on the High Council itself. No, this required something personal, something that would shake her confidence, tarnish her perfect image. Jack brought up his terminal and began searching through classified databases, using his military clearance to access information not available to the general public. Most species in the Galactic Council were notoriously private about their biology, and the Aurorans were more secretive than most. Hours later, bleary-eyed from alcohol and exhaustion, Jack found what he was looking for: a classified xenobiological report on Auroran reproduction. Most of it was redacted or written in scientific jargon he couldn't decipher, but certain key facts stood out. Aurorans were notorious for their genetic purity. Unlike many species that had embraced genetic diversity, the Aurorans practiced careful selection of reproductive partners, believing it preserved their superior traits. Cross-species reproduction was technically possible with a handful of compatible races, but was considered the ultimate taboo. And humans, surprisingly, were genetically compatible. Moreover, the report noted that Auroran females experienced a specific biological cycle, a period of fertility that occurred only once every few years. During this time, their natural aversion to other species was somewhat diminished due to hormone fluctuations. Jack's drunken mind began formulating a plan so outrageous he might have dismissed it immediately had he been sober. But fueled by whiskey and resentment, it took root. What would hurt Nirala Tavin more than anything? What would shatter her superiority complex and arrogant belief in Auroran genetic purity? Becoming pregnant with a half-human child. The very thought was absurd, impossible. Yet, as Jack researched further, he discovered that Nirala's fertility cycle was predicted to begin within the month, according to medical records that should have been private, but were accessible through his military clearance. A clear violation of protocol that his drunken mind dismissed as justified. She's ruined my career, he muttered to himself, the plan taking firmer shape in his mind. She's hurt human interests for years. She deserves to face consequences. He would need an opportunity, some situation where they would be alone, away from the constant surveillance of the station. And he would need to somehow overcome the natural distaste Aurorans had for physical contact with lesser species. As if fate were conspiring with him, Jack received notification the next morning that he and Ambassador Tavin had been selected to represent the Council at the opening of a new neutral trading post in the Tau Ceti system. The journey would take 4 days in a diplomatic vessel, with minimal crew. The perfect opportunity. Jack spent the next week preparing, studying Auroran psychology, physiology, and social cues. He learned that despite their outward disdain, many Aurorans were secretly fascinated by humans, whose rapid advancement and adaptability were unlike anything in their experience. This fascination was considered shameful, never discussed openly. He also discovered that Auroran color changes were involuntary responses to emotion, and that the specific pattern of gold and crimson that occasionally flickered across Narala's skin when she argued with him wasn't, as he'd assumed, anger. It was interest, perhaps even attraction, suppressed beneath layers of cultural conditioning and prejudice. The diplomatic vessel Harmony departed Station Zenith with minimal fanfare. Aside from Jack and Narala, there were only 4 crew members, a pilot, co-pilot, and 2 service staff. The ship was luxurious by military standards, with private quarters for both diplomats and ample common areas. Narala, predictably, spent the first day avoiding Jack entirely, taking her meals in her quarters and communicating only through ship's messaging when absolutely necessary. On the second day, Jack implemented the first phase of his plan. He arranged to accidentally encounter Narala in the ship's small observation lounge, bringing with him a bottle of rare Auroran spirit, a gift from a previous diplomatic mission that he'd saved for a special occasion. "Ambassador," he said pleasantly when she looked up from her datapad, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "I thought perhaps we might use this journey to address some of our professional differences, away from the politics of the station." Narala's skin shifted from its usual composed blue to a suspicious purple. "I see no reason to discuss anything unofficially, Commander." Jack nodded, setting the ornate bottle on the table between them. "Then perhaps we can simply share a drink." This was a gift from Ambassador Kelleth before his passing. He suggested it was best appreciated when shared. The mention of Kelleth, a respected elder diplomat whom Jack knew had been Narala's mentor, caught her attention. Her skin rippled with brief patterns that Jack recognized as conflicted emotions. "Kelleth gave you Auroran Starfire?" she asked, eyeing the bottle with obvious surprise. "That is unexpected. He believed in building bridges, not walls," Jack said simply, taking a seat without waiting for invitation. "Something I've tried to honor in my own work despite challenges." The implied criticism wasn't lost on Narala, but neither was the reference to her beloved mentor. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded slightly. "One drink. For Kelleth's memory." It was a small victory, but Jack knew it was just the beginning. Over the course of that evening, he carefully guided their conversation away from contentious political issues and toward cultural exchange. He asked thoughtful questions about Auroran art and philosophy, displaying a knowledge of her culture that clearly surprised her. By the third glass of Starfire, a potent, shimmering liquid that tasted like cinnamon and stardust, Narala's usual cold demeanor had thawed noticeably. Her skin occasionally flickered with patterns of gold that indicated she was actually enjoying the conversation. "I must admit, Commander, you are not entirely what I expected," she said finally, studying him with large iridescent eyes. "Jack, please," he said with a smile. "We're off duty, after all." She hesitated, then inclined her head slightly. "Jack, then, though this changes nothing about our professional disagreements." "Of course not," he agreed easily. "But perhaps understanding each other better might help us navigate those disagreements more productively." The conversation continued late into the ship's night cycle. Jack was careful not to push too hard, too fast. This was merely groundwork, establishing a connection that would make what came next possible. Over the next day, Jack made himself useful and agreeable, assisting with preparations for the trading post ceremony and deferring to Narala's expertise where appropriate. He sensed her confusion at his changed behavior, the suspicion gradually giving way to cautious engagement. On the final night before they would reach Tau Ceti, Jack arranged a private dinner in the ship's conference room, transformed with subdued lighting and elegant settings. When Nirala arrived, her skin showed brief flickers of yellow surprise. "What is this?" she asked, suspicion returning to her voice. "A peace offering," Jack said simply. "We're about to represent the council together. I thought we might try to establish some common ground." The meal progressed through several courses, each paired with wines and spirits from various worlds. Jack had researched Auroran dietary preferences and ensured everything would appeal to her physiology. The conversation remained professional but cordial, touching on aspects of the upcoming ceremony and shared diplomatic experiences. As the final course was cleared away, Jack brought out a small device and placed it on the table. "A gift," he explained as Nirala eyed it curiously. "It's a holographic representation of Earth's oldest surviving artistic creation, cave paintings created over 40,000 years ago by our ancestors." He activated the device, and the air between them filled with ghostly images of ancient handprints, hunting scenes, and abstract patterns that slowly rotated in 3 dimensions. "Primitive, I'm sure, by Auroran standards," Jack said, watching her reaction carefully. "But it represents something I think transcends species, the desire to leave a mark, to communicate across time." Nirala studied the images with genuine interest, her skin shifting to a thoughtful violet hue. "We have similar artifact from our early history, though ours are, of course, considerably older." "Of course," Jack agreed with a small smile. "Still," she continued, reaching out as if to touch one of the holographic images, "there is a raw quality to these that is compelling. Your species was reaching for something beyond mere survival, even then. We're not so different in our fundamental needs," Jack said quietly. "For meaning, for connection." Nirala's eyes met his, and for a moment, the carefully constructed barriers between them seemed to thin. Her skin rippled with complex patterns, too quick for Jack to interpret fully, but he recognized confusion and perhaps curiosity. "Perhaps," she said finally, looking away, "though our paths of development have been quite different." Jack nodded, pouring her another glass of the Auroran spirit they'd shared the previous night. "Different paths, yes. But we're both here now, representing our worlds to the stars. That must count for something." The conversation deepened as the night progressed, touching on personal histories and beliefs rather than just diplomatic positions. Jack spoke of his disappointment with how human expansion had sometimes mirrored the worst of Earth's colonial past. Nirala, in turn, admitted that Auroran isolation had fostered an arrogance that wasn't always justified. "We were among the first," she said, her speech slightly affected by the alcohol. "But that doesn't mean we will always be the best. Your species adapts so quickly. It's unnerving. Is that why you've been so hard on us?" Jack asked, seizing the opportunity. "Fear of what we might become." Nirala's skin darkened, and for a moment Jack feared he'd pushed too far. But then she sighed, a very human-like gesture she must have adopted from diplomatic circles. "Perhaps," she admitted, "though your methods are often concerning, as are your efforts to obstruct us at every turn," Jack countered, but without heat. "The mining operation shutdown will hurt real people, Nirala, colonies that depend on those resources." Her skin flickered with what might have been guilt, quickly suppressed. "Rules exist for reasons, and exceptions are made for favored species," Jack said, leaning forward. "You know the Vordenai violation was worse, yet you advocated for them." "They are ancient allies," she defended. "They are useful to you politically," Jack corrected, "just as punishing humans serves your reputation back home." Nirala stood abruptly, her skin flashing angry red. "You overstep, Commander." Jack rose as well, standing close enough that she would have to step back to maintain the distance Aurorans typically preferred with humans. "She didn't." "Do I?" he asked softly. "Or am I simply saying what we both know is true? This isn't about mining quotas or treaty violations. It's about making sure humans know their place." "And if it is," she challenged, her voice dropping to match his, "your species acts as if the universe belongs to you after mere centuries in space. The rest of us spent millennia building what you now enjoy. So we should be permanently subordinate." accept second-class status in the Council despite contributing more in resources and military support than any three other species combined. They were standing very close now, the argument creating an intimate tension neither had anticipated. Jack could see the rapid color changes rippling across Narala's skin. Anger, frustration, and something else. The gold and crimson pattern he noted before, stronger now. "Your arrogance is boundless," she whispered, but made no move to step away. "As is yours," he replied. "The difference is I admit mine." What happened next wasn't entirely in either of their plans. Perhaps it was the alcohol, or the unusual honesty of their conversation, or simply the release of 3 years of tension finding an unexpected outlet. Narala moved first, or perhaps Jack did. Later, neither would be entirely sure. Their lips met in what began as almost an extension of their argument, fierce and challenging. Jack had researched enough to know that physical contact between their species wasn't dangerous. No toxic reactions or biological incompatibilities. But he hadn't expected the electric sensation of her skin against his, the subtle vibration that seemed to pass between them. Narala pulled back first, her eyes wide, skin cycling through colors so rapidly it created a disorienting strobe effect. "This is I don't." Jack had come this far. His plan, his revenge, was within reach. And yet, in that moment, looking at her genuine confusion, he felt a flicker of doubt. Was he really going to do this? Use intimacy as a weapon? But then he remembered the colonies that would suffer from her arbitrary shutdown, the careers she'd damaged with her prejudice, his own position, now at risk because of her personal vendetta. "Don't think," he said, pulling her close again. "For once in your life, Narala, don't analyze. Just feel." What followed was a night neither had anticipated. There was still anger in their coming together, still the clash of personalities that had defined their professional relationship. But there was also a surprising tenderness that emerged as barriers, physical and emotional, fell away. For Jack, the experience was colored by the knowledge of his true purpose, a guilt that he pushed aside by reminding himself of all Narala had done. For Narala, it was a surrender to something her culture had taught her to deny, an attraction to a species she had been raised to consider inferior. In the artificial dawn of the ship's cycle, Jack awoke alone in his quarters. A message on his terminal simply read, "This never happened. We will continue as before." Cold, formal, and entirely what he had expected. Perfect. The opening ceremony at the Tau Ceti trading post proceeded without incident. Jack and Narala maintained professional distance, their interaction so formal that no one would have guessed at their night together. When they returned to Station Zenith, they went their separate ways without a word beyond official farewells. Weeks passed. The investigation into the mining operations continued, though with surprising cooperation from the Auroran representatives. Without explanation, certain restrictions were lifted to allow essential shipments to continue to the most dependent colonies. Jack didn't see Narala at the station often during this period. According to station gossip, she had been uncharacteristically withdrawn, attending only mandatory council sessions and delegating many of her usual duties to subordinates. 6 weeks after their return, Jack received an encrypted message on his private channel. "My quarters. 2,000 hours. Come alone." No signature was needed. The encryption key was Auroran. When Jack arrived at the diplomatic wing, where Narala's quarters were located, he was surprised to find no security presence. Typically, Auroran diplomats maintained ceremonial guards, but the corridor was empty. The door slid open at his approach. Narala stood by the viewport, her back to him, her usual formal attire replaced by simpler clothing. When she turned, Jack was shocked by her appearance. Her skin, normally vibrant with shifting colors, was pale and almost static, with only occasional ripples of dark blue, an Auroran sign of distress. "Ambassador?" he began, uncertain. "Don't." She cut him off, her voice sharp. "Don't pretend this is a diplomatic meeting." Jack remained near the door. "Why did you call me here?" Narala's laugh was brittle. "Because the universe has a cruel sense of humor, Commander Reynolds. Because despite everything our scientists believed about genetic compatibility requiring technological intervention, despite all probability, I am carrying your child. The words hit Jack like a physical blow. His plan had worked better than he could have anticipated. He should have felt triumph, satisfaction that his revenge had succeeded beyond expectation. Instead, seeing Narala's genuine distress, he felt the first real stirrings of regret. How is that possible? He managed, though he knew perfectly well it was possible. That had been the entire point. An excellent question, Narala said bitterly. One that has occupied our medical experts for the past week. Apparently, my particular genetic sequence has an unusual compatibility with human DNA, something that would normally require extensive lab work to achieve. She turned away again. Or one night of spectacular stupidity. Jack took a step forward. Narala, do not, she whirled back, her skin flashing deep crimson, dare to offer sympathy. Do you have any idea what this means? For me? For my position? For my people? I understand it's complicated. Complicated? Her laugh was almost hysterical. I am an Auroran diplomat of the highest lineage, from a family that has maintained genetic purity for 17 generations. And I am carrying a half-human child. Complicated doesn't begin to describe it. Jack fought to keep his expression neutral, though inside, his emotions were in turmoil. This was what he had wanted. Narala Tavin brought low, her pride shattered, facing exactly the kind of scandal that would devastate her personally and professionally. So why did it feel hollow? What do you plan to do? He asked quietly. Narala's skin darkened further. What options do I have? Termination would be the logical choice, but she stopped, her hand moving unconsciously to her abdomen. But Auroran law forbids it except in medical emergencies. Our birth rate is too low, every child. Too precious, even this one apparently. And if you have the child, my career would be over. My family would disown me. I would become a cultural outcast. Narala's voice was flat. The child would face discrimination from both our species. A half-breed with no place in either world. The weight of what he had done began to settle on Jack's shoulders. He had wanted revenge, wanted to hurt Narala in a personal way. But he hadn't fully considered the consequences. Not for her, not for the innocent life now growing within her, and not for the diplomatic relations between their species if the truth ever came out. No one needs to know, he found himself saying. About the father. Narala's eyes narrowed. You think I would lie? I think you would protect yourself and the child, Jack said carefully. There must be a way to manage this discreetly. Why do you care? She asked sharply. This benefits you, does it not? The arrogant Ambassador Tavin, humbled by her own hypocrisy. I can see in your eyes, Reynolds. Part of you is enjoying this. Jack couldn't deny it. Part of him was. But that part was shrinking rapidly in the face of the real pain he was witnessing. I never wanted. He began, then stopped. What hadn't he wanted? This had been exactly his plan. I didn't think it through, he admitted finally. No, you didn't, Narala agreed coldly. Neither did I. And now we both faced the consequences. They stood in tense silence for several moments before Narala spoke again, her voice quieter. I called you here because you have a right to know. And because, like it or not, we need to decide how to handle this situation. Together. The word together hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to face. Whatever you decide, Jack said finally, I'll support. Financially or however you need. Narala's skin flickered with surprise. That's more than I expected. I'm not the monster you think I am, Jack said, a statement that felt particularly hollow given what he had deliberately orchestrated. Perhaps not, she conceded. Though at this moment, I'm not certain either of us is particularly admirable. In the weeks that followed, Jack and Narala established an uneasy alliance. They met discreetly to discuss options and make plans. The most immediate concern was keeping the pregnancy secret for as long as possible while they determined a sustainable long-term strategy. Auroran pregnancies lasted approximately 14 Earth months. The physical changes wouldn't be obvious to non-Aurorans for at least half that time, but fellow Aurorans would notice subtle changes in her skin patterns and energy fields much sooner. Nirala requested reassignment to a special diplomatic mission studying anomalous energy readings in a remote sector, a convenient excuse to be away from both Station Zenith and Aurora Prime. The request was granted, in part due to Jack's behind-the-scenes advocacy with human representatives who held considerable sway with the scheduling committee. The diplomatic vessel Solitude was assigned for her use, a small but comfortable ship designed for extended missions. Jack arranged to be assigned as the human liaison to the mission, a position that raised eyebrows given their known antagonism, but was approved based on his experience. Their first weeks aboard the Solitude were tense. Without the immediate shock of the discovery to unite them, their fundamental differences reasserted themselves. Arguments erupted over trivial ship matters, old diplomatic grievances, and the uncertain future they faced. "You're being irrational," Jack said during one particularly heated exchange about navigational routes. "The rimward approach adds 3 weeks to our journey for no scientific benefit. It also takes us through sectors with minimal traffic," Nirala countered, her skin flushed with angry orange, "reducing the chance of encounters with other diplomatic vessels." Jack threw up his hands in frustration. "No one is going to discover your condition from a routine ship-to-ship greeting. You don't understand how Aurorans perceive each other," she snapped. "The energy field distortions from pregnancy are obvious to those with proper training. Any high-ranking diplomat would notice immediately." They settled on a compromise route, as they did with most decisions. Slowly, a pattern emerged: conflict, negotiation, resolution. The same skills that made them effective diplomats, when not sabotaging each other, served them in managing their shared crisis. As the weeks passed, a strange thing began to happen. The forced proximity and shared secret created an intimacy neither had expected. Conversations that began about practical matters often drifted into personal territory. Jack learned about Nirala's childhood on Aurora Prime, the intense pressure of belonging to a political dynasty, the expectations that had shaped her life. In turn, he shared stories of his own path, the colonial upbringing on Mars, the loss of his parents in the Deimos incident, his drive to ensure humanity had a strong voice in galactic affairs so that such tragedies wouldn't be dismissed as colonial troubles. "So your antagonism toward Auroran policies wasn't merely professional," Nirala observed one evening as they shared a meal in the ship's small galley. "No more than yours toward humans was purely diplomatic," Jack replied. She acknowledged this with a slight nod, her skin shifting to a thoughtful blue-green. "We are products of our histories, both personal and cultural. Does that excuse either of us?" Nirala considered this, absently placing a hand on her abdomen, a gesture that had become more frequent as the pregnancy progressed. "No," she said finally, "but it might help us understand how we arrived at this point." The 5th month brought new challenges. Nirala began experiencing physical symptoms that the ship's medical facilities were ill-equipped to address. The hybrid nature of the pregnancy created complications no medical database could fully anticipate. "Your blood pressure is concerning," Jack said, reviewing the scanner results. "According to the medical AI, there's some kind of incompatibility with the placental interface." Nirala's skin had taken on a worrying grayish hue that Jack had never seen before. "The child is drawing more energy than an Auroran fetus would," she explained weakly. "It has aspects of human metabolism that our systems aren't designed to support." Their carefully constructed plan began to crumble. Nirala needed specialized medical care that could only be found on Aurora Prime or one of the major medical stations. But seeking such care would expose her condition. "We have no choice," Jack insisted as Nirala's condition deteriorated. "We need to contact Aurora Medical Command. They'll know immediately," she protested. "My career. Your life is more important." Jack surprised himself with the intensity of his concern. When had the well-being of this woman, whom he had deliberately set out to ruin, become so important to him? In the end, necessity made the decision for them. Nirala collapsed during a routine ship inspection, her body no longer able to compensate for the unique demands of the hybrid pregnancy. Jack had the Solitude change course immediately, heading for the nearest Auroran medical facility at maximum speed. What followed was a political and personal firestorm. News of Ambassador Tavin's condition spread through diplomatic channels with astonishing speed. The Auroran High Council demanded explanations. Earth's diplomatic corps scrambled to understand the implications. Jack found himself suddenly fighting not for revenge, but for protection, for Narala, for the child, and for the fragile understanding that had grown between them during their months in isolation. "I will accept full responsibility," he told the emergency session of the Diplomatic Ethics Committee. Ambassador Tavin's reputation should not suffer for what happened. The committee, composed of representatives from 6 different species, regarded him with expressions ranging from confusion to disgust to what might have been amusement. Commander Reynolds, the Centaurian chairperson, said, tentacles rippling thoughtfully, "While we appreciate your willingness to accept blame, Ambassador Tavin has already provided her testimony." Jack froze. She has. Indeed. She claims the intimate relationship was consensual, if unplanned. She has requested medical leave and diplomatic immunity from Auroran cultural consequences, citing Galactic Council primary law that protects reproductive rights across species boundaries. Relief and confusion warred within Jack. Narala had protected herself legally, and him by extension, but at what cost to her standing among her own people? When he was finally permitted to see her at the medical facility, Narala was resting in a specialized treatment chamber. Her skin had regained some of its normal luster, shifting slowly through calming blues and greens. "You shouldn't have done that," were his first words to her. Taking all the responsibility, Narala's eyes opened, focusing on him with characteristic intensity despite her weakened state. "I didn't do it for you. I know." Jack moved closer to the chamber. "For the child, then?" "Partly." She struggled to sit up, and Jack moved to assist her. "And partly because I'm tired of living according to expectations that require me to deny reality." "What reality?" "That species are different, but not superior or inferior. That isolation breeds arrogance. She paused, her skin flickering with colors Jack couldn't interpret. "That I have come to care for someone I once despised." The admission hung between them, neither fully ready to explore its implications. Instead, Jack asked, "How is the baby?" Narala's expression softened. "Stubborn, like both its parents. The doctors have stabilized the placental interface and developed a nutrient regimen that accommodates both Auroran and human metabolic needs." "Will you return to diplomatic service?" Jack asked, changing the subject to safer ground. "Eventually, though not as Aurora Prime's representative." She gave a small, ironic smile. "I've been reassigned to head the new interspecies cultural exchange initiative. Apparently, the Council feels I have unique qualifications for fostering understanding between different species." Jack couldn't help but laugh. "That's surprisingly progressive of them." "The Galactic Council adapts when it must," Narala said. "Unlike the Auroran High Council, which has formally censured me and revoked my family status." The casual way she mentioned such a devastating personal loss caught Jack off guard. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. "That's a high price to pay." "Is it?" She met his eyes directly. "I'm beginning to think some prices are worth paying for truth, for growth." As her health improved, Narala and Jack began the complicated process of planning for their child's future. Neither had anticipated becoming parents together, especially not under such circumstances, but both found themselves increasingly committed to making the situation work. "The child will need both cultures," Narala insisted during one planning session. "Auroran and human." "Agreed," Jack said, surprising himself with how natural the co-parenting discussions felt. "But where would we base ourselves?" "Station Janet, perhaps, or one of the independent colonies. Places where mixed-species families are more common." The term family gave them both pause, but neither challenged it. News of their unusual situation had spread throughout the diplomatic community. Reactions were mixed. Some saw it as a scandal, others as a curiosity, and a surprising number viewed it as a potential bridge between species that had long maintained an uneasy relationship. "Ambassador Keldrith has invited us to dinner," Jack mentioned one morning, reviewing his messages. He says the Centaurian Council is most interested in the biological and cultural implications of our partnership. Narala's skin rippled with amusement. How delicately phrased. The Centaurians are nothing if not diplomatic. Should I accept? She considered this, her hand resting on her now visible pregnancy curve. Yes, we cannot hide forever. Better to face the curious and the critics directly than allow rumors to flourish. The dinner would be the first time they appear together publicly since the news broke. As Jack helped Narala prepare, adjusting the specially designed formal where that accommodated her condition, he found himself watching her with emotions he still couldn't fully name. "You're staring, Commander," she noted, her skin flashing briefly with gold patterns that he now recognized as pleasure. "Jack," he corrected automatically. "And yes, I am. You're remarkable." The gold patterns intensified. Flattery from a human. How unexpected. Not flattery, he insisted. After everything, the career setbacks, your family's rejection, you're still standing. Still adapting. It's admirable. Narala turned to face him fully. We are both adapting, are we not? This situation is hardly what either of us planned. The unspoken truth hung between them. Jack had planned it, or at least the beginning of it. The guilt of that knowledge had become a persistent ache as his feelings for Narala transformed from antagonism to something much more complex. "Narala," he began, feeling a sudden need to confess. "There's something I need to tell you about." A chime interrupted him. The Centaurian transport had arrived. "It will have to wait," Narala said, moving toward the door. "Diplomatic duties call." The dinner was the first of many social and official functions they attended together over the following months. Initially uncomfortable under the scrutiny and sometimes outright hostility, they gradually developed a united approach to handling the complex politics of their situation. As Narala's pregnancy progressed, the medical challenges increased. The hybrid nature of the child created complications that required constant monitoring and occasional interventions. During one particularly difficult episode, Jack found himself maintaining a vigil by Narala's medical chamber for 3 straight days, refusing to leave despite the staff's insistence. When she finally stabilized, her eyes fluttered open to find him still there, exhausted but present. "You look terrible," she murmured, her skin pale but stable. "You should see the other guy," he joked weakly, relief making him lightheaded. Narala's hand found his, a gesture that had become natural between them. "You didn't have to stay." "Yes," Jack said firmly, "I did." In that moment, something shifted between them. The pretense that they were merely co-parents managing a diplomatic crisis began to dissolve, revealing the deeper connection that had formed through months of shared challenge. The final trimester brought new tensions. A faction within the Auroran government began formal proceedings to strip Narala of her citizenship, arguing that her genetic betrayal made her unfit to represent or even belong to their species. Simultaneously, certain human political groups questioned Jack's loyalty, suggesting his relationship with an Auroran diplomat compromised Earth's interests. "They're calling for my reassignment," Jack told Narala one evening, tossing a data tablet onto the table between them. "Apparently, I've gone native, their words, not mine." Narala's skin darkened with anger. "And my people claim I've degraded the evolutionary achievements of 17 generations. We're collecting quite the set of compliments." Despite the attempt at humor, Jack could see the toll the constant attacks were taking. "Maybe we should disappear for a while. There are independent colonies that would welcome us, places without Auroran or Earth diplomatic reach." "Run away?" Narala looked surprised. "That doesn't sound like the stubborn human commander I've come to know. Or like the proud Auroran ambassador," Jack acknowledged. "But this isn't just about us anymore." As if in response, Narala's skin rippled with the distinctive pattern that indicated the child was moving. Jack had learned to recognize it, one of many small intimacies they now shared. "No," she agreed, her expression softening. "It isn't." Before they could discuss further options, an urgent communication arrived. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session specifically to address the diplomatic implications of the Reynolds Tavern situation. They're making policy because of us, Jack said, half incredulous, half concerned. That can't be good. Or it could be exactly what we need, Narala countered, ever the strategist. A council ruling would supersede both Earth and Auroran jurisdiction. The session was scheduled for the following week. Jack and Narala spent the intervening days preparing, reaching out to potential allies, and trying to anticipate the council's concerns. The proceedings began solemnly. Representatives from 27 species filled the Grand Council chamber, their attention focused on the unusual pair standing before them. This council has been convened to establish precedent regarding interspecies unions and offspring, the Vordenai chairman began, specifically to determine the status and rights of both the parents and the forthcoming child in the Reynolds Tavern case. What followed was a 10-hour debate that ranged from biology to politics to philosophy. Species after species offered their perspective. The Centaurians argued for acceptance based on their own history of genetic diversity. The Thalkri opposed on grounds of natural order. Earth's representatives were divided, while the Auroran delegation uniformly condemned the union. Through it all, Jack and Narala stood together, occasionally offering testimony, but mostly listening as their personal choices became matters of galactic policy. During a brief recess, Jack found Narala alone in a small antechamber, her skin pale with exhaustion. "You should rest," he urged. The baby is fine," she assured him, though it seems to object to being the center of interstellar politics before even being born. "It's been quite active during the proceedings." Jack smiled, placing a gentle hand on her abdomen. The sensation of movement beneath his palm still amazed him each time. "We created quite the diplomatic incident, didn't we?" he said quietly. "Indeed we did." Narala covered his hand with hers. "Though not, I think, the one either of us originally intended." The comment struck too close to Jack's buried guilt. "Narala, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you months ago." She looked at him curiously, her skin rippling with question patterns. "What is it?" Before Jack could finally confess, the chamber doors opened. "The council is reconvening for the final vote," an aide announced. "Later," Narala said, squeezing his hand briefly before moving toward the door. "Whatever it is, it can wait until after the council rules." The final vote was surprisingly decisive. By a margin of 19-8, the council ruled that interspecies relationships and offspring were to be protected under galactic law, with full rights of citizenship in both parental societies. Furthermore, discrimination based on hybrid status was explicitly prohibited. A watershed moment, the Centaurian representative declared. "The galactic community officially recognizes that our future lies in connection rather than isolation." For Jack and Narala, the ruling meant immediate practical relief. Both Earth and Aurora Prime were bound by council law to recognize their child and protect their rights as parents. "It seems," Narala said as they left the council chamber, "that our personal complication has become something of historical significance." "Just another day in diplomatic service," Jack replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The weight of his unspoken confession still pressed on him. That night, in the privacy of their shared quarters, Jack finally found the courage to speak the truth. "The night on the Harmony," he began, watching Narala's expression carefully. "It wasn't entirely unplanned on my part." Narala's skin remained calm, showing only mild curiosity. "Few things you do are entirely unplanned, Jack. That's one of your strengths as a diplomat." "No, he took a deep breath. "After that last incident with the mining shutdown, when you submitted that review of my performance, I wanted revenge. I researched Auroran biology, discovered your fertility cycle was beginning. I specifically engineered that situation to get you pregnant." He expected shock, anger, the return of the hostility that had marked their early relationship. Instead, Narala's skin rippled with what appeared to be amusement. "Jack," she said finally, "I've known that for months." It was his turn to be shocked. "You knew? How?" "I'm a diplomat from a species that communicates emotional states visibly through our skin." She gave him a look that managed to be both fond and exasperated. Did you really think I couldn't tell when a human was plotting something? Your intentions were practically radiating from you that night. Jack stared at her, struggling to process this revelation. But if you knew, why did you? Why did I allow it to happen? Narala's skin shifted to a thoughtful blue. That's more complicated. Partly curiosity, partly rebellion against the constraints of my position, and partly, her skin flushed with gold. Partly because, despite our antagonism, there was always something compelling about you. Something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. So, the whole time we've been dealing with this, you knew it started as a revenge plot? I suspected at first. Later, I became certain. She moved closer to him, but I also observed how that plot transformed into something else entirely. How you changed. How we both did. Jack felt the weight of months of guilt lifting, replaced by a different kind of intensity. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Perhaps not, she agreed. But you have it nonetheless. We've moved well beyond where we started, Jack. The question is, where do we go from here? Before he could answer, Narala suddenly gasped, her skin flaring bright with alarm patterns. Her hands went to her abdomen. The baby? Jack asked, instantly concerned. Yes, I think. She breathed deeply, trying to steady herself. I think it's coming. Much earlier than expected. What followed was a frantic rush to the medical facility, emergency calls to specialists, and the most terrifying 12 hours of Jack's life. The hybrid nature of the pregnancy made the birth process unpredictable and dangerous. Twice, Narala's vital signs dropped to critical levels. The medical team, comprised of both human and Auroran doctors, worked frantically to stabilize both mother and child. Jack remained as close as the medical team would allow, his thoughts a desperate litany of pleas to whatever powers might be listening. Not like this. Not when we've come so far. Not when I've only just found her. Really found her. Finally, in the quiet hours of Station Midnight, a new sound pierced the clinical hum of the medical bay. The cry of a child, strong and insistent. Congratulations, Commander, the head physician said, exhaustion and wonder mingling in their voice. You have a daughter. When they finally allowed Jack to see them, Narala was resting in a recovery chamber, her skin pale but glowing with a soft, steady light he had never seen before. And cradled against her was a tiny form wrapped in medical monitoring fields. She's perfect, Narala whispered as Jack approached. Come see what we've done. The infant was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Delicate features that somehow harmoniously blended human and Auroran characteristics. Her skin had the iridescent quality of Narala's people, but with a warmer undertone closer to human coloring. And already, even in her first hours, it flickered with color in response to stimuli. Happiness, curiosity, contentment. She's beautiful, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. Gently, carefully, he reached to touch his daughter's tiny hand. 5 perfect fingers unfurled and grasped his much larger one with surprising strength. She needs a name, Narala said softly. Something that honors both her heritages, Jack suggested. Something that means something to both our worlds. They settled on Lyra, after a constellation visible from both Earth and Aurora Prime, a bridge between their stars just as their daughter was a bridge between their species. News of Lyra's birth spread quickly, through diplomatic channels. The first hybrid child born of human and Auroran parents became something of a celebrity before she was even a week old. Gifts and congratulations arrived from representatives of dozens of species. Even the Auroran High Council, which had been so swift to condemn Narala, sent an official acknowledgement of the birth. Political opportunism, Narala commented wryly as she read the message. They see which way the wind is blowing and don't want to be left behind. Does it bother you? Jack asked. That they're using Lyra as a symbol? Narala considered this as she gazed down at their sleeping daughter. No, she decided finally. If she helps create understanding between our peoples, that's a worthy purpose. Though I'll make sure she knows she's loved for herself, not for what she represents. In the months that followed, Jack and Narala established a new life together. Neither fully returned to their previous diplomatic roles. Instead, They jointly accepted positions as special advisors to the Council's newly formed Interspecies Relations Committee, where their unique perspective was considered invaluable. They established a home on Station Zenith, in a section increasingly populated by mixed-species families drawn by the Council's progressive policies. There, little Lyra grew and thrived, developing abilities and characteristics that surprised even the specialists who monitored her development. She had her mother's color-changing skin, though with a more limited palette and greater voluntary control. From her human heritage, she inherited a remarkable adaptability and resilience to environmental changes. And uniquely her own was a talent for language that manifested early. By her first birthday, she was already communicating in both human and Auroran modes. One evening, as Jack watched Nirala teaching Lyra a traditional Auroran color meditation, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From bitter enemies to reluctant allies to co-parents to what they were now. Partners? Mates? Neither human nor Auroran terminology quite fit the relationship they had forged. Later, when Lyra was sleeping and they had a rare moment of quiet together, Jack broached the subject. What are we, Nirala? After everything we've been through, what would you call this? Nirala's skin rippled thoughtfully, settling into the gold-laced pattern that Jack now recognized as her expression of contentment in his presence. The Auroran language has no word for what we are, she said finally. Nor, I suspect, does English. We are something new, just as Lyra is. Pioneers, Jack suggested with a smile. Perhaps. She moved closer, her hand finding his in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Or perhaps simply two beings who found connection where they least expected it. From revenge to this, Jack mused, still sometimes amazed by the transformation. Not the diplomatic outcome either of us anticipated. Diplomacy often yields unexpected results, Nirala replied, her skin glowing with amusement and affection. As does vengeance, apparently. I prefer this outcome, Jack said softly, drawing her close. As do I, Nirala agreed, her skin shifting to the deep gold that signified her strongest emotions. Though I may still occasionally get absolutely furious with you, as humans so colorfully phrase it. I wouldn't have it any other way, Jack laughed, and together they watched the stars through the viewport, the same stars that shone on both their worlds and on the future they had created, not through planning or diplomacy, but through the most unexpected journey of all.